We need a bit of fun because I don't have my mover.
I know, I was thinking.
I don't have my mover today.
Anyway.
Empty seats, please. Yes.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Statutory Planning Committee meeting of the 22nd of October 2025. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing via the Commission's website and YouTube. Commission members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them with their consideration of the items today. Can I just say thank you for your patience. We have had a Swan Valley Statutory Planning Committee meeting this morning and we do try to get the timing right, but we have run a little bit over, so I do appreciate that you have been waiting, so thank you for that. And I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past and present. In relation to apologies and leave of absence, we do have two commissioners on leave. We have Commissioner Lakey and Commissioner Heron. We have Commissioner Adair joining us online. Good morning, Commissioner Adair, and the remaining members in person today. Disclosures of interest. We do have a few in relation to item 3.2, the section 31 reconsideration of subdivision to create two rural lots in Baldivis. Member Franklin has declared an actual impartiality interest. The planning consultancy has been engaged as a consultant to Hames Charlie to prepare the City of Rockingham scheme number 4. And as part of this current work, she has not been directly consulted on this proposal. However, the city's scheme is referenced in the report. And consistent with prior conflicts that she considers she should not participate in this item. So you'll be stepping out on this one, Member Franklin. Thank you. Also in relation to this one draft local planning scheme 18, Member Harmon has declared a direct pecuniary interest in that he's employed by Satellite Property Group, which has a number of large projects within the City of Swan, and so seeking to participate. Member Harmon. And in relation to item 3.4, oh, sorry, any further declarations of interest? None today, thank you. Disclosures of representation. I would like to make one in relation to the Shire of Harvey Local Planning Strategy Amendment number 1 for Taranto Road Mile Up, in that I have met with the applicant and consultants on this item in the normal course of my duties as chairperson and have not been provided with any additional information that is not available to other members today. Are there any other disclosures of representation? Thank you very much. Declaration of due consideration. Can all members please indicate that they have received and considered the agenda ahead of this meeting? Thank you all. And confirmation of the previous minutes of Wednesday, the 24th of September 2025. Members, any matters to raise in relation to the minutes? Right, if I could have a mover and seconder. Thank you very much. Moved by Member Knight, third by Member Franklin. Any dissent? Thank you. Carried. So we'll go to deputations now and I'll hand over to Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to everyone that's present in order to make a deputation to the Statutory Planning meeting this morning. You will be invited to join the table or promoted to a panelist via Zoom to deliver your deputation this morning. You have been advised of your allocated time, which will be managed by a time which will appear on the screen and count down that time. If you do have a PowerPoint presentation this morning, this will be displayed on the screen throughout your presentation and you're requested to advise us as you wish to advance the slides. Moving to the first deputation on the agenda this morning, which is on item 4.2 on the agenda, the City of Armidale Town Planning Scheme number 4, Amendment number 127. Consent to advertise. We're welcoming Daniel Martinovich and Simon Monkton if you'd like to join us at the table. Thank you. Over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
Good morning and thank you for the opportunity to present. My name is Simon Monkton and Dan Martinez. Forestdale Townside East is like a 10,000 piece jigsaw of the sky. Whilst being identified, there is good reason why it has taken 25 years before a group has sought to develop it. It's heavily fragmented. GM Property Group has spent 8 years consolidating 16 of the 35 individual land holdings, each lot important to deliver critical housing in a consolidated urban form. The site does not afford flexibility like a single ownership site would. The scheme text proposed seeks to introduce further complexity and challenges that are beyond the environmental objectives and planning principles, as Dan will speak to.
Thanks, Simon. Next slide, please. So for context, we're presenting on the amendment prior to it being advertised, as we're keen to have the scheme text in workable form now, as we have a local structure plan prepared and ready to lodge. There are two overarching concerns that we'll be talking to this morning that we're seeking modifications on. They both relate to how environmental objectives are legislated in local planning schemes. The first matter relates to a requirement to retain all Bankshire woodland as compared to most of the Bankshire. And the second matter relates to the mechanism and requirement to retain existing trees. Next slide, please. There was a local scheme amendment in October of last year, but prior to this, we'd undertaken significant work to identify and protect the key environmental attributes of the site. We went through a region scheme amendment process, which involved engagement with the EPA, as well as the Minister for Planning at the time. This resulted in approximately 4.5 hectares being reserved under the region scheme, which was a significant environmental outcome. Once the MRS amendment was finalised, we undertook detailed engagement with the EPA, where we agreed on suitable scheme text provisions, which informed our amendment request. Next slide, please. Again, please. Notwithstanding the previous process and engagement, the City initiated a scheme amendment that introduced a range of additional reporting requirements with uncertain outcomes. In our view, this was an act of drafting legislation on the fly without an established policy framework or position. Next slide, please. With respect to the Bankshire woodland, we request that the retention requirement reverts back to what was agreed with the EPA as the state government agency responsible for its protection. Specifically, we request a requirement to retain 0.54 hectares. This outcome is shown in the central bottom of the plan on the right, with the plan on the left showing the Bankshire woodland in black hatching. Next slide, please. And again, please. More, please. And so for reference, our requested wording is on screen and reflects what was agreed with the EPA. Next slide, please, Sam. So in the matter of tree retention, our view and preference is that tree retention targets belong in policy, not statute. However, should the committee determine that a tree retention plan is warranted, we request that the wording on screen is adopted, which importantly, it specifies which trees should be targeted for retention and that this should occur within public open space and road reserves. Next slide, please. Sorry, once again, Sam. So in concluding, the matter of tree retention applies to all land and all structure plans. Legislating the matter on a case-by-case basis, such as this, should be approached with caution. If the intent is to mandate tree retention targets, this needs to be done at the strategic level as an outcome of the urban greening strategy currently under preparation, and then in conjunction with the review of livable neighbourhoods and the WAPC's guidance on structure plans. Thank you for your time. Please answer any questions the committee has.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Members, are there any questions? I think you've been very clear in your requests. Thank you very much.
Deputation this morning. All 3 on the agenda, the City of Swan draft local plan number 18. To have it. Welcoming Peter Stewart and David Mariana.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing us to speak to this matter.
I'd just like to begin with, Road Group represent a landowner with major land holdings in the northeastern corridor of the City of Swan, the Brakovich properties, and they operate a number of extractive industries and associated land uses, including recycling and material sorting through, as I said, the northeastern corridor. Next slide, please. We just want to draw out some of the matters associated with the draft local planning scheme number 18 and some of the matters associated with extractive industries. The city's local planning strategy, as you can see on the map, makes it quite clear that basic raw materials are to be protected through its planning schematics. So the reason for this, just in case there's any ambiguity behind it, basic raw materials, also known as strategic geological supplies, supply critical foundation materials for new homes across the state, road building and maintenance, and there's also sand, clay, gravel, sand, which service all of the above. So it becomes quite clear why the BRM itself is identified as needing protection. Next slide, please. Road Group has, in fact, consulted quite extensively with both the city and DPLH on this matter, and there's just an example in front of you of one of the matters that we've raised. There are a number of other matters, but in particular, they outline key considerations and requests for modifications, in particular to those BRM lots and proposed rural small holding zonings associated with that. So what this means is there's a number of complexities and nuances to each of the properties addressed. However, for the purpose of this presentation, we seek to be clear in intent. We'd like to see a reversion of the classification, land use classification within the intended zonings from an X use to a discretionary use. So an X use will likely lead to the sterilisation of those materials. And as can be seen from that map, possibly, maybe not, these industries follow the strategic geological supplies mapping in State Planning Policy 2.4. Next slide, please. Whilst the non-conforming use pathway in theory might address some of these issues, they basically provide a frail mechanism to ensure continuity of the existing approvals. BRM extractions in themselves are not static land uses. They constantly evolve simply because they are extracting material from the earth itself, making it difficult to apply for the land uses. Extractive, as I'm pleased to mention, this isn't consistent with the State Planning Policy 2.4 and the guidance in the local planning strategy. Next slide, please. Our request is quite simple. We would ask the SPC to consider whether these matters raised are consistent with the state planning policy framework and whether the draft scheme appropriately addresses the enforced planning strategy.
Thank you very much for your deputation today. Members, are there any questions? There are no questions, but we'll certainly discuss this when we come to the item. Thank you very much.
The next deputation on item 4.3 this morning is Liam Vanderlinde and Ian Humphrey from the City of Swan, and they are joining by Zoom this morning. Good morning, Leon. If you can hear me, could you please turn your audio and video on so you may participate in the meeting this morning? Thanks very much and welcome to the Statutory Planning Committee. Over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members, and thank you for the opportunity to make a deputation on the city's new scheme. Just want to confirm, can you hear us and see us?
Yes.
Thank you. We have worked closely with the department over the past 4 years to prepare the scheme, and we thank department officers for their collaboration in that regard. Following approval of the city's scheme review report by the WAPC, which highlighted the city's diverse character and size, and that the scheme were kept functional through scheme amendments, the focus has been on the city's dire need to, in the first instance, manufacture a scheme that is aligned with the planning regulations and model scheme text without impacting the development potential of any land. This was necessary to ensure that the cumulative impact of potential land use changes across different areas do not delay the process of getting the base scheme document approved, and to then facilitate those changes which will impact development potential through separate scheme amendments. More recently, however, feedback received from the department offices has reflected a substantial change in that scope. There are two specific matters in relation to housing delivery that we request you to consider consider when making a decision. The city facilitated the delivery of 2,400 constructed new dwellings in the last financial years, representing 12% of the new housing stock delivered in WA in that year. Proves that the city is doing some heavy lifting in that regard. Although in the current market, this is achieved mainly through greenfield development, our scheme provides for sufficient zoned land to also accommodate infill potential. A recommendation to do away with the dual density codes by simply adopting the higher code on the basis that it will be consistent with other schemes will be an example of density done wrong. The criteria setting for the dual coding considered the age of housing stock and had specific requirements that were developed with the community under a previous version of the R codes. An uninformed application of the higher code would ignore the rationale for which such density was appropriate, thus making it difficult to justify to the community. To take Balladura as an example, simply adopting the higher code would not consider the impact of recent changes, such as the Malaga train station, infill development under consideration on land in Lake Farm Retreat, its impact on infrastructure capacities, and the fact that the current R codes now allow multiple dwellings in lower codes. The city also has concerns if the public drinking water source area policy provisions becomes a special control area, as it will result in planning applications being required for single dwellings in most of our growth areas. It will be adding unnecessary red tape as these matters are addressed at scheme amendment, structure plan and subdivision stages, and will slow down the delivery of housing, working directly against the state's focus to streamline these approvals. There are other modifications of less importance raised with us by planning staff, which the city doesn't support. These will be addressed through the consultation process. We will, however, continue to work closely with the department to address questions and concerns about the new scheme as we move into the advertising phase, and again, thank them for their ongoing collaboration. Thank you for listening to us, and we're happy to address any questions.
Thank you very much, Leon and Ian. I did let you go over there because the scheme is a very important instrument, so we were keen to hear from you. I will now ask if there are any questions of you from members. Thank you very much. Look, we've taken note of those issues that you've raised, and we will deal with those when we come to discuss the item, noting your particular concerns about the dual coding there. So thank you very much for your deputation today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next deputation this morning is on item 3.1 on the agenda, Up 11B development application for the proposed demolition of existing buildings and construction of a mixed development at lot 72, number 872 Grover Street in Inglewood. And we're welcoming Miles Harmer. Miles, I understand you have a video this morning. Is there audio on that?
Yes, there is audio.
Okay, lovely. So we'll attempt to display.
Brown thing is the development.
Yep. Okay, over to you when you're ready, and we'll start
Should go.
playing that video now for you. Thank you.
Planning Committee opposes the proposed development at 872 Beaufort.
Sorry, it is a bit laggy.
The Mount Lawless Society Planning Committee opposes the proposed development at 872 Beaufort Street on the grounds that it is out of all scale, proportion and character to the existing heritage streetscape.
Very
This is
consistent.
Beaufort Street, at the north boundary of the heritage area. This section of Beaufort Street has been largely cleared. However, the adjacent roads throughout Inglewood still retain their heritage character. There are still a few original shop fronts, and on the left, original houses. This area is suitable for revitalisation in line with the Beaufort Street Local Development Plan. Indeed, the Mount Lawley Society supports high-density housing in appropriate locations. However, when we pass the clock tower, we see that there is no need for revitalisation in the centre of Inglewood. This area has already been revitalised by the arrival of Aldi on the left, the Monday markets, which begin here, the new Inglewood Town Square in front of the library on the right, the Inglenook seating areas, and Woolworths just visible ahead. The local development plan is superfluous. The landscape here is predominantly of single-storey shops dating from the late 19th and early 20th century. This video was shot on a Sunday morning to avoid traffic, but during the day the shops are all open and busy. Note the clear horizon and open sky. Here, the Heritage Area Policy, which is the Character Retention Guidelines Inglewood, is a more appropriate assessment tool. This is where the proposed development would be. This is the shops directly opposite.
All single story.
It states that new buildings should be designed to fit into the existing streetscape and be designed in a similar style, scale and proportions as existing heritage buildings, which we can see are, as described in the guidelines, predominantly one and occasionally two-storey buildings. There are now more than 350 suburbs in the Perth metropolitan region, but only 3 of these suburbs are listed as heritage areas: Mount Lawley, Minora and Inglewood. If this proposal goes ahead, it will set a precedent that will destroy the heritage character of the centre of these precious suburbs. It would be much better to retain these centres
area in the
for
middle.
future generations to appreciate. Thank you for your consideration. The Mount Lawley Society.
Can I just quickly add that the Beaufort Street Local Development Plan on which this is based is first of all 7 years old. Secondly, its aims have been achieved. And thirdly, it's going to disappear in LSP4. The other thing I might mention is that they claim that the city is moving away from the heritage protection. And in fact, LSP4 has a new aim, which is to enhance and conserve the cultural heritage significance and character within designated heritage area. So it's got 2 fundamentals on which this is based.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the time you took to prepare that video for us. That is appreciated. Members, are there any questions of Miles? No questions? Thank you very much.
It is also an item 3 on the agenda, and we're welcoming Dean Williams, James Fletcher and Ryan Powell.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present at today's meeting regarding the proposed mixed-use development. I'm Dean Williams, Coordinator Planning Services. With me, I have Ronnie House, Senior Planning Officer Heritage, and James Fletcher, Service Lead Planning. Next slide, please. As per the City's formal responses to the DPLH dated 4 July and 6 October 2025, the proposed development is not supported in relation to adverse impacts of the proposed building height, heritage considerations, visual privacy, and car parking. The City notes some technical matters related to waste collection servicing have been addressed. Though the development is not supported by the City also provided modifications to the DPLH's proposed condition setting, which should be implemented in full should the SPC be aligned to support the proposed development. Next slide, please. The proposed recommendation, which seeks to combine the demolition and redevelopment components of the proposed development, is contrary to clause 6.64 of LP3, does not follow due process and prejudices the demolition of the existing building. The proposed separation of approvals for the demolition and redevelopment would mean the demolition of the existing building would not be eligible for consideration as a significant development application, which requires a value threshold of 20 million or more. The allocation for the demolition of the existing building would reside with the city. In relation to the architectural style, the proposed development does not satisfy the Art Deco style guide characteristics of the Beaufort Street LDP, which should incorporate strong horizontal elements that run the full height of the facade, vertical elements generally located in the centre of the building, at the corners or in a repetitive rhythm of verticals across the facade. Street facades featuring sleek and often cubic forms of small apparent masonry with corners that curve in plan. The city's comments regarding the Art Deco style of the proposal are reflected by the State Design Review Panel. The proposed development is not supported by heritage impact assessment, which is a standard requirement for a development of this nature. Next slide, please. The primary built form outcomes of the site are established through the Beaufort Street LDP, which are informed through extensive community consultation and with the relevant maximum heights reflected through LPS 3, which applies a maximum height of 4 stories to the site. The proposed height of 6 stories is not consistent with the existing development context, current or future planning framework. The impacts of the proposed building height are also exacerbated by the massing of the development, which includes boundary walls up to 6 stories in lieu of 4, and with significant discretion sought to the rear setbacks. In relation to the rear setbacks, the development seeks variations to all levels, with significant variations sought from level 2 to the rooftop, being a minimum of 3 metres to a maximum of 7.6, as identified in the second figure in red. The intrusion of the development equates to approximately 220 metres square to plot ratio area and private open space. Next slide, please. As demonstrated by the overshadowing diagrams, the proposed height and massing of the development results in a significantly greater impact to adjoining properties in terms of the extent and duration of overshadowing, with adverse impacts to outdoor living areas, major openings to habitable rooms and solar collectors, including in excess of 200 metres squared of overshadowing to 188th Avenue during the winter solstice. The proposed height and massing of the development will significantly and adversely impact adjoining properties, including future redevelopment. As such, the development cannot fundamentally satisfy element 3.5 orientation of the art codes, which requires building form and orientation, minimises overshadowing habitable rooms, open space, and solar collectors of neighbouring properties. Next slide, please. In relation to visual privacy, the city has recommended condition setting to address the relevant matters. In relation to commercial car parking, the DPLH's report applies reductions to car parking which are not applicable through the Beaufort Street Local Development Plan, which applies a reduced rate due to the area's proximity to higher frequency public transport. The city recommends a reallocation of the 9 surplus residential base to the restaurant and residential visitors due to existing parking issues in the locality, with up to 40 cautions and infringements within the last calendar year, primarily relating to people parking within the bus lane. Next slide, please. In conclusion, it would be contrary to orderly and proper planning to approve the proposed development in its current form, as a separate development application has not been submitted to the city for demolition of the existing building, which is within the heritage protection area. The proposed development does not address the Art Deco provisions of the Beaufort Street Local Development Plan and is not supported by heritage impact assessment. The proposed development does not warrant the use of discretion through Section 171R of the Planning and Development Act, as the proposed development results in adverse impacts on the amenity of adjoining properties in response to building height and the massing of the development. Thank you, and we can address any questions.
Very much, James and Ronnie, your deputation today. Members, do you have questions? No questions? No, thank you.
The next item 3.1 on the agenda, we're welcome Joseph Tilley, Laurie Scanlon and Alice Ardip.
Thank you for the opportunity to present today. Perhaps we'll start with Laurie's presentation first, and then is that okay, Laurie? Okay. Well, Laurie's got the PowerPoint, and then we'll.
Just very quickly, I realise the lack of time here. So look, just going through, this is obviously the proposal being put forward to the committee. I note that the height of this project, as you can see, is the building is far more squat than it could present. So we just go to the next level, next slide, please. These are the numbers on the project, which in most cases you can see that we've actually achieved any of the design requirements, outcomes for landscaping and other items. Next. Go through this quickly. I think most of the committee have seen all these reports. As far as the site context goes, the architects have reviewed the neighbourhood, and we believe we have addressed the issues relating to the style and context. Next. We again here have tried to demonstrate the fact that the various architectural components that we've tried to introduce into the architectural style, and we believe that the Art Deco has been presented in a manner which does relate and is complementary to the surrounding zone, and the scale of it, the way we've presented it, does actually relate to a 2- and 1-story building, the way that we've addressed the front facade. Next. As far as the site context here goes, we're just trying to, on the overshadowing, we do note from the report done by the officer on this project is the concern raised about the 180 neighbour on 180 Linus, I guess. We've actually, on this drawing, we've now shown where the actual PV panels have been, are actually in place and the degree of overshadowing. So there's a number, we've gone through and looked at the overshadowing, and only in the 2 months of the year, it does actually overshadow those things for a couple of hours. And we acknowledge the fact that in the conditions put forward to the recommendation for the project, the idea of relocating those PV panels, we have agreed, and that we are happy to relocate those panels, so they will actually not, the overshadowing won't form a problem. This drawing also does reflect the, in a lot of cases, a compliance scheme at 4 levels would do just as much overshadowing as our scheme. And we believe that we can condition that as it's been done, and we'll relocate those panels. One of the PV panels in question has already got a large tree that is actually producing just as many problems, but we will relocate them and solve that issue. Next. These are further studies we've taken at length to have a very, very good attitude, approach and understanding of the issue raised. Next. And just keep going. With this image, just go through the proposed plans, but at the ground plane, we've tried our best, and I think there is a good outcome here. We've tried to introduce what's referred to as a laneway access through the whole site to the rear of Linus Lane. This approach has given us an amount of community space within the project and also without. We've set back the building on the front of Bowden Street to acknowledge the fact that the City of Stirling has a piazza adjacent or to the south of our project, and we've tried to complement that and certainly give more space to allow that to be used in future for community events, which is it's currently done. The project, the images on the right is trying to create, we have got some really good internal spaces for the end tenancies. And we believe that also is a good offering up as far as the final complete scheme. Next. I'm not around, sorry. Just go through the process. I appreciate the time's running out. But look, the scheme as such is, look, the way it's been designed is such that there's a huge amount of light access to the units. It's a really good approach. It's a really good outcome for the end usage. Next. And these are just the images. I'll just better stop there, but look, we do accept the planning reports.
Yeah. Thanks, Laurie. I'll thanks, Laurie, for an explanation on the changes. Thanks to Will and Rachel for an excellent report. I think you've done a great job over the last 12 months. I'll just touch on building height. So Beaufort Street is a street that is currently undergoing transition. We see that from Highgate in the City of Vincent through to Inglewood in the City of Stirling to Bedford in the City of Bayswater. Development in the street is responding to the wish of the community for more active uses, more places to live, and development that provides for more opportunities to shop, recreate and socialise. The city's current building height of 4 stories may have been appropriate when LPS 3 was adopted many years ago, However, in an area where heritage protection is required within the residential streets, density should be concentrated within the activity corridors to compensate, and that is effectively what this development proposes to achieve. The City of Stirling is currently in the process of preparing its draft local planning scheme number 4. And under LPS 4, the site is proposed to be rezoned for mixed use to centre with a density of residential R80. Under the R codes, the acceptable outcome for building height on R80 code of land is 4 stories, meaning no change to building height, which is what the city will essentially tell you that it is designed future character. However, on the city's website, various suburb information sheets relating to potential zoning changes as part of LPS 4 are provided. For the suburb of Inglewood, the subject site is located within the area labelled the English District Centre. There is a statement under Inglewood District Centre which states that the future development in the district centre will be characterised by mid-rise buildings of approximately 6+ stories. While these information sheets do not hold any statutory weight, they currently exist as part of a series of documents relating to the scheme review process, having evolved out of professional assessment, counselling report and community engagement. Interestingly, out of the 123 submissions that were received during the public consultation process, 48% were in support of the development. That's 60 out of the 123, which supported the development at its scale. The strong level of community support demonstrates that the proposed height of the development is consistent with the community's expectations, and that the city have misrepresented the community in the writing of LPS 4 in maintaining a 4-story height limit. The proposed development, as we in the community see it, is consistent with the intent for appropriate development in the mixed use and future centre zone, representing quality design, which provides much needed housing in the locality. In closing, there are no issues with the conditions of approval. A draft set was presented to us 2 weeks ago, and we're able to hold discussions with officers regarding their ability to be satisfied. We're happy with the final set that are in front of you this morning for determination. Once again, thank you to Will, Rachel, and also Paula. We were happy to take on any questions in relation to the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation this morning. Members, do you have questions of the applicant team? No questions? I just want to, can I just check? I've got a few documents open here. I just want to go to the item. Sorry, excuse me. The question that I had is just about the modifications for the overshadowing of the solar panels. I'm just trying to find, I think it was clause condition 3 scribbled down here. Was it was requiring a modification to the uppermost floor, but reference changing the location of the panels. So I'm just trying to find that to make sure So currently under 3D, it talks about the roof of the uppermost floor is to be modified to prevent midday wind overshadowing of the existing solar collectors on the roofs of the buildings at 180 8th Avenue. And you've talked about relocating the panels.
Yes, yes, Madam Chair. There's an opportunity to, I guess, clarify overshadowing either through modifying the development, which we don't intend to do. The other option is to move the solar panels, which the owner of the subject property has indicated that they would be happy for us to finance to move those solar panels. So that is, I guess, the way that we would look to satisfy that condition by working with the owner and paying for the relocation of those solar panels to avoid. It's only a very small portion of shadow that falls onto those solar panels. So we in good faith will pay for. We have a client here who's agreed to that, and that's come through the consultation process. So we're more than happy to pay for the relocation of the solar panels to ensure that their amenities maintained and they're able to have adequate access to sun to those solar panels.
Peter, have you provided any information through to the SDAU in relation to that agreement that you've reached with the neighbour?
We have not. This condition was received very late. It wasn't in the draft set of conditions that we had received. It came on at the end of last week. So, we're happy to provide that to be able to satisfy the condition.
Okay, thank you. We'll deal with it when we come to the item. Members, are there any other questions?
this morning is on items 31 rural lots at lot 1027, number 213, Carnup Road, Baldivis, and we'll work with Rochelle Pricer.
Good morning. I'm good to start. Yes, good morning, Chair, committee members and staff. I'm presenting on behalf of the Pricer family, who are the landowners and residents of the property. Rochelle Pricer is present to assist in responding to any questions you may have. This matter returns to you for reconsideration under Section 31 of the State Administrative Tribunal Act. And the modified plan before you is presented and proposes more equally sized lots that are consistent with the area. This plan was presented and agreed at mediation. Despite this, the officer's recommendation remains a refusal, which recommendation we respectfully ask the committee overturn, particularly given the officer's assessment acknowledges the merits of this proposal and confirms that discretion is available to grant approval. Now, I'm just turning to these slides. We have included some aerial and drone images of the land taken from various viewpoints to demonstrate to the committee that approval of this subdivision will result in no change to the land or this location. Now, this first slide here is an aerial view. It shows the existing characteristics. You've got the lot sizes, the frontages, built forms and open landscape, which collectively show that this subdivision would simply introduce a boundary line which reflects the existing features of this area. We also identify on this slide the two comparable corner lot subdivision approvals mentioned in the officer report. Just moving to slide 2, this is a view across the land of the rural landscape and existing improvements. There will be no change to the land as a result of the subdivision. The next slide, if we could just move to that one, another drone image, is a view of Carnup Road and identifies the existing dwellings, the crossovers, the common boundary and all the open fields in association with those two site areas. And now if we could just move to the next slide, slide 3. So no, we've done 3. So on to 4. This is a view from the southern side of Carnup Road, a similar view with the common boundary line being marked just to show where that exists and adjacent to that tree line, and basically the landscape here will not change. And if we could just move to the next slide. This is a view taken from the common boundary line which is proposed in the subdivision and looking towards the east, and Serpentine Road in the background. This is the existing dwelling at street number 213 Carnup Road. And if we can just move to that final slide now, that would be great. This one shows a view of that same lot, and you're looking west towards the intersection of Carnup and Serpentine Road and the open fields associated with the dwelling at number 213 Carnup Road. So collectively, these slides are presented to show that there will be no change to the rural landscape or activities on the property as a result of this subdivision being approved. And it's on this basis and all the submissions we have put in support of it that we respectfully seek the committee's support in recognising the unique circumstances and merits of this application and exercising its discretion to grant approval to formalise the common boundary between these two independently operating site areas. So thank you for the opportunity to present and would welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions? Thank you. Look, I would just ask a question that at the time that the dwellings were built, I assume there was an understanding this was a single lot.
Yes, so they were built, it was two, the second dwelling was constructed in 2004, it was approved in 2004, and as the officer's report has mentioned in there, that was an understanding that wasn't to provide a guarantee of any future subdivision proposal presented. In relation to that, I would just point out the other subdivision approval that has been presented by the officer in the report from 2001, which was a subdivision granted by the WA Planning Commission because with 2 dwellings constructed on it. I didn't say because of, but they had 2 dwellings constructed on it that were approved under the same scheme, and that subdivision was approved presumably at discretion
So I'm just trying to understand that that was clear at the time of the construction of the dwelling, but I'm trying to understand what the unique circumstances are, given that that was clear at the time that the dwelling was constructed.
The unique circumstances really relate to the officers presenting the precedent issue. There's no other property in this location which has the two dwellings, the dwellings that were constructed under the former scheme. There's no other land in this location with two dwellings sitting on a corner lot and operating already independently as two individual site areas. So they're the unique circumstances, and also the fact for the last 20 years, no second dwellings have been able to be approved on raw land in the city of Rockingham. So there's no chance of this particular subdivision, if it's approved, resulting in a flood of applications based on similar grounds.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Thank you very much for your deputation.
The next deputation this morning is on item 3.3 on the agenda, which is the City of Nedlands Local Planning Scheme Number 3 and Local Planning Strategy Report Review, and we're welcoming Sergio Damiano via Zoom this morning. Good morning, Sergio. If you can hear me, can you please turn your audio and video on so you may participate in the meeting this morning?
Sure. Let me just do that. Can you see me now and hear me?
Yes, thanks very much. Over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
Yeah, look, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. Look, I'll just speak briefly. The city's local planning strategy is approximately 7 years old, and the local planning strategy is 6 years old. As you know, as some of you may know, the local planning strategy was prepared by the Department of Planning as there was a conflict between the City of Nedlands and the state at the time, namely around residential densities. The City of Nedlands wasn't really proposing any significant changes. As a result of the scheme being prepared by the department, there has been significant areas within the city that have been rezoned to allow for high density and mixed housing, particularly on Stirling Highway and Hampton Road. And that includes a strip of land that protrudes into Dalkeith and Nedlands. Generally speaking, the city feels that the scheme is working well. The city has received a high number of infill applications for R40 to R80, creating a mixture of new townhouses and small apartment developments, adding to the housing diversity in the area. But also the city has received numerous large-scale mixed-use and apartment developments, particularly along Stirling Highway and Hampton Road, which is assisting in building housing diversity, density, and supporting the main street along Hampton Road and the emerging town centre at the corner of Florence Road and Stirling Highway. That's where the Captain Stirling is located, which there's currently a Woolworths and an Aldi that's under construction, with small retail restaurants and cafes and a public square. So we're excited about that development. But just some of the examples of the development that has been carried out. 37 Stirling Highway is a large student accommodation development over 430 apartments, which is about to start. 1A Thomas Street, which is 20 apartments, which is currently under construction. 91 Broadway, which is 14 apartments, which is currently under construction. 1 Seymour Avenue, 167 apartments, which was recently built, and 19 Louise Street, which is 55 apartments, which is currently under construction. That's just a flavour of what we're seeing in the City of Nedlands. So we'd like to see the scheme continue along that pathway. It's enabling infill development to build diversity in new housing stock and grow the population of Nedlands, which I think is what's needed. The local planning strategy, however, is a little bit different. As you know, the state and local planning framework has changed significantly over the last 7 years. If you look at our local planning strategy, it is quite out of date given those changes. The city has done a review of its local planning strategy in the sense of what it would like to see moving forward, and there is a particular focus from the city to look at environmental matters, looking at enhancing transport infrastructure, looking at public open space, because the City of Nedlands and Dalkeith, as you know, predated Stevenson Hepburn, and is starting to densify, certainly around the Stirling Highway area. And there is a need to look at providing additional public open space in those areas. We also have an outdated retail and commercial strategy, which dates back to 2001, and a housing strategy, which dates back to 2001. So we'd like that all reviewed. We also identify, even though there has been...
Just to state, you are at 30 minutes over and you did give a brief deputation today, so I'm holding you to account on that.
Yep, no, I'll just finish up. Look, we do identify, we have identified that there are some targeted areas for density increases as well. So we feel that a local planning strategy needs to be reviewed, and we would ask the Commission to support that. We would also ask to keep the current local planning scheme with some targeted amendments to it in future. We will be working closely with Rowan Millen and his team. We do want to work closely with the department on this. We don't want a repeat of what happened when the last scheme was reviewed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation, Sergio. Members, do you have any questions? No questions today, Sergio, but thank you very much for the update on activity in the City of...
Thank you.
The next deputation is on items 3.4 on the agenda, which is the Shire of Harvey Local Planning Strategy Amendment number 1 at Lot 102 Toronto Road, Myalup. And we're welcoming Rod Dixon.
Chair and members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Next slide, please. Property we're talking about, Lot 102, is just under 200 hectares immediately south of the Myalup town site, between the Myalup town site and the desalination plant, uniquely located. It actually comprises, it's not a battle axe lot, it's a rectangular lot that runs through to the high water mark, so it includes the beachfront as well. It has a number of features to it environmentally that suggest it's not practical for agricultural use, rural use, and that really sits at the premise for our proposal. Next slide, please. Having said that, it is impacted by ongoing four-wheel driving, motocross, constant fence replacement, etc. We see this proposal as an opportunity to both address environmental conservation opportunities and set a framework for investigation of the site. Next slide, please. This is the proposal. It is not for any rural residential intensification of use, which is mentioned 1,000 times in the report. It is simply to put this table into the planning strategy. So members, I'd ask you to note that, and we seek your support to this. I will just read to you a reaffirmation that the Shire gave the department on that. The proposed amendment doesn't specifically relate to an intensification of land use. The amendment identifies the key matters that require investigation and consideration to determine if a change of land use can be accommodated on the site in the context of its constraints and opportunities. As provided in the council report, the nature of the proposal is not one that would generally be considered for rezoning in the absence of being included in the local planning strategy. Really important point. Next slide, please. So we're seeking to identify the site as an investigation area under the Shire's planning strategy, set out the matters that need to be addressed before we seek an amendment. That's $500,000 to $750,000 worth of studies noting the constraints on the property. So the proponent, the landowners, would like these goalposts in place so that they can go and spend that money, if you like, knowing there's no guarantee of a scheme then being initiated. It doesn't commit the site to any specific zone or land use outcome. Next slide, please. As the report notes, and this chronology shows, there's been a number of efforts to progress a proposal for the land. I would say to you, the Shire received a submission from us back in 2018. The report suggests it wasn't supported. It was not supported in the form it was proposed. The Shire concluded there was a different approach that could be taken. Ultimately, through engagement with the department, led us to this approach of amending the planning framework, including the land and planning strategy, so that we had guidance on investigation. Next slide, please. So we ask that the committee here today support the Shire's recommendation of support with modifications. Doesn't preempt environmental, doesn't preempt a scheme amendment. It simply provides the basis for investigation. Next slide, please. It's actually supported not only by the Shire, but by DVCA. In the schedule of submissions, you'll note that DVCA actually acknowledges this is a practical way to come at the land. No specific land use proposed, amongst others. Next slide, please. I won't dwell on this, but significant environmental outcome could be achieved through investigations. Next slide, please. That's it. I'll welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Rod. Rod, one question from me is that in sort of delving into the report, it does talk about the broad range of permissible uses that are available under the rural zone. So I just wanted to really clarify on the change of land use or change of zoning, given that in the report it talks to the fact that there's a number of A and D uses which are quite interesting, such as it goes to unhosted STRA, talks about tourist and visitor accommodation, winery, private recreation, industry, cottage, etc. So there's a range there. Is this investigation intended to explore some of those permissible land uses, given that that still might face some of this, some of the issues will have to be traversed in the environmental and the access, etc., bushfire, etc.
Yeah, look, it may well do. My personal view is that this proposal, the ability to investigate the land, as the Shire sort of said, will ultimately inform whether there's anything viable on this property or not. The notion of going down the path of a development application straight away for one of those potentially permissible uses was explored. The likely outcome is a mix of those, but we don't specifically know what will be viable until we investigate these. There could be some other uses that require a change in the scheme. We don't know that. So where we landed was, if we were to contemplate a scheme amendment, as the Shire's alluded to, the land's not currently identified in the planning framework, in the planning strategy. It would be more sensible to identify it without any guarantee of any rezoning being initiated. Let the proponents go and do the investigation, and there are a lot. There's a high bar. And in the context of that, potentially develop up a proposal that could include some of those uses, but may include others.
So you're saying that you'd like to investigate a range of uses, potentially including some that are already permissible?
Yeah, that's the very nature of this unique situation. They may include those. I can't predict what the findings of that group of investigations might determine. We know that there's wetland to the north east, so there's some fringing wetland vegetation. There's some tuarts. There are obviously beachfront that could be seeded as part of this proposal. Specifically, what comes out. Some of the uses may be permissible now, some may not. And so I guess that's where we landed. A specific standalone scheme amendment that might incorporate a range of environmental related scheme provisions into the scheme to ensure the appropriate management of the land, as well as list specific uses which have far better planning and particularly environmental outcome for the property during the process we might have to go through.
Any members' questions? Yes, Member Franklin.
Through the chair, I just wanted to clarify, when you're looking at the actual extent of the planning area A, and it's not an investigation area, it's a planning area, is that the correct term?
Yeah, essentially that table that I had up earlier.
So in its extent, at the moment, it seems to be confined to the rural component, but really the lot 102 does go to the high water mark. So I just wanted to clarify the extent of the planning area that we talk about the foreshore and so on?
Or two parts to the answer to that. Look, the intent is to deal with the whole property. And certainly the Shire, in recommending support, added an additional modification or additional requirement that we include the coastal process and investigate that component as well, and that would certainly be the intent.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
Yes, Member Harmon.
Thanks. Rod, you mentioned that you've had, so there's obviously been discussions with the Shire and there's a level of support there. There's also been some changes at the Shire, I understand, recently. Those discussions that you've had, are they with sort of the current staff administration or was it previous?
Yes, absolutely.
The reason I ask is the option from a purely statutory perspective, the option exists to do the investigations necessary to facilitate scheme amendment request, but you're seeking to sort of open the door by this channel slightly.
I appreciate it's an unusual situation. The property is unusually uniquely located between the Mylop and the desal plant. We went down the path of effectively saying, look, a rural residential proposal here would be inappropriate. Notwithstanding the report alludes to that. Farming and other uses here would not be appropriate. There are some uses that you're quite right, and the chair has referenced, are capable of approval and could be explored. But we took the view that there is a broader range of controls probably needed as part of any development outcome. The best way to investigate those is not to just put a scheme amendment forward, because as the Shire said, will be met with this is not in the framework. The conclusion, the consensus was to include it in framework first via this process. And if I can just quickly read you, this is part of, you mentioned changes of staff. This is only a couple of, sort of a month old. The most significant constraints have been identified as key matters requiring investigation, noting that all constraints will be considered and the outcome of these investigations will largely be the determining factor of the site's land use capabilities going forward. So we know there's a high bar to pass. There's a lot of investigation required. We're just seeking an opportunity to do that.
Members, any questions? Rod, did you, so just in terms of your views on rural residential, did you just say that you don't think that would be appropriate?
Yeah, there's no proposal for rural residential on land. And as I said in my deputation, this is not proposing an intensification of land use. Here now, I can't actually tell you what the land use would be that comes out of this. I can't tell you what the use footprint, if you like, might be out of this. There is no question there's going to end up being a number of, if we get as far as investigation and proposing a scheme amendment, a number of conservation and or environmental controls. There is the beachfront, which is currently privately owned, which for the public good could be seeded as part of a proposal, the protection of the main dunes as part of a proposal, and then inland there are other elements. But there may well be, within all of that, the opportunity for a mix of uses. Because that's what we like the opportunity to investigate.
Any further questions, members? Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you.
That does conclude our verbal deputations for today. We have also received a written deputation on the City of Armidale's Town Planning Scheme number 4 amendment number 27 from Meredith Kenny against the recommendation, and that's included in the agenda today. So that means we can now move on to consider the non-confidential items before us today, and commencing with item 3.1, the Part 11B development application for the proposed demolition of the existing building and construction of a mixed-use development at lot 72 Beaufort Street, Inglewood. And Paula De Perna and William Schaefer are joining us on this item. Paula and William, we have had some deputations on this item today, inviting you to make any comments that you wish, but I'd also welcome your comments in relation to the condition 3 in relation to the modifications to the uppermost floor, and just hearing from the applicant team today about the fact that they mentioned that they've reached agreement with the neighbour to relocate the panels. I need to start there, please.
Thank you, Chair. In response to the matters raised in relation to the demolition for the site, the department's report does consider the matters raised by the city in the context that a separate consideration as to the merits of demolition is required. Whilst the scheme outlines separate development approval has to first be granted for the demolition of the building, the department has formed the view that both the demolition and the development can be considered within the one application if sufficient information has been provided within the application documentation. The merits of the proposed demolition can be considered as a separate issue from the proposed development and must be determined separately and prior to any consideration of the proposed development. As a result, separate recommendations and conditions are provided. It's noted that should SPC determine, or should the committee determine not to approve the demolition, then a determination in relation to the proposed development cannot be made. The planning instruments that affect the property and the site more broadly generally consider and encourage more intensive development within the LDP area and the Inglewood Town Centre sub-precinct. In terms of the adverse impacts, the assessment has considered matters such as overshadowing on the southern side of Beaufort Street, and the condition has been recommended to address the direct impact of the additional height being sought, either by amendments to the roof and the upper floors to minimise the impact, or suitable other arrangements that will be made. Should, as outlined in the applicant's deputation, that agreement be formalised between the landowner and the proponent, that can be provided to the department in satisfying that condition. The facade is articulated and contributes towards a reduced perceived bulk. The 6th floor is set back and isn't visible from the street when directly viewed by in front of the property or along major corridors. The balconies and windows to the rear of the development are set back from the residential properties in accordance with the acceptable outcomes of the R codes, and provide some contribution towards minimising the bulk of perceived additional height. The inclusion of the balconies and the materials and finishes also contribute towards softening of the perception of the building from Lowry Lane. They are the main points. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to.
Thank you. Could you just elaborate on the overshadowing?
So the overshadowing assessment has been verified. So the applicants' submitted drawings have been independently assessed by the department. The impact on the additional height on 188th Avenue has identified that there will be impact on the solar collector on that property. We felt that the impact should be mitigated, and as a result have included option 3 to address that either through the relocation. Whilst the condition doesn't expressly state relocation, because that would be subject to a third party approval per se, we've provided flexibility by including suitable arrangements.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Members, questions? Member Moore?
I think you've covered most of it, and it was mostly in relation to both presented for us and including the city. The demolition issue, you've assessed it separately, and therefore you think that having an assessment on its merits means that we are then able to consider it, but we wouldn't be giving 2 separate approvals, we just put it into the same approval, is that correct?
So through the chair, the application can consider 2 components. The department's view is if those components are assessed separately and independently of one another, that it doesn't trigger the requirement of a separate application per se.
And just to be, just cut you off, but just to be clear, there's no issue with heritage being demolished on site.
through the chair, no, the consideration of the demolition is supported. Doesn't trigger any of the requirements under the framework for it to be retained.
Thank you very much. And the other question, I'm sorry, is that okay, Chair? So that was about the demolition. The other one was the, in terms of building height and scale, given that we're going to the 6 stories, one of the elements that seemed to be is that rear, the diagram that was put up there with the rear bulk and scale. Could you just reiterate your views on that and how that's mitigated?
Through the chair, the consideration of the built form alignment. So there's balconies which recede, and there are portions of the building that do project forward. So the articulation both through the various levels contribute to mitigating the concerns on bulk. The use of materials and finishes in terms of the way that the building has been designed at the lower level versus the mid-rise level and then the uppermost floor, where could be considered sufficient as to addressing the concern of the perception of bulk along the laneway.
Okay. And I think that was my main questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? No, okay. All right, we'll move to consideration of the item. If I could please have a mover and a seconder for the item. Thank you very much. Moved by Member Harman, seconded by Member Knight. Do you wish to speak to the item, Member Harman?
Yeah, look, just to say that I think it's obviously it's
Can I sorry, I just need to check. Please bear with me. Are we considering the demolition as a separate? Okay, so can I, sorry, just be clear from myself. So I wasn't clear with you. So first of all, we're dealing with the recommendation that we deal with the demolition. So we're just going to deal with that recommendation, which is on page 3 through to page 4 of the agenda. So we're just dealing with the demolition at this stage. Any comments in relation to the demolition?
No, comfortable with the process. I think it's an efficient way to deal with it. It's been clearly separated and articulated that way in the report, so no issues.
Okay, any comment?
Probably nothing further other than the report comprehensively lays out the rationale there, so yes.
It's on the demolition from any other members? Okay, any dissent to that? Thank you, that is carried. Are dissenting?
Yes, I'm dissenting on the actual overall development, so it implies that I'm in favour of the demolition. So on that grounds,
no problem.
Yes.
Thank you. So that's noted, and we'll note that in the minutes. Thank you very much. Any further dissent on that? Just recording Member Franklin. Thank you very much. And we'll now deal with the development itself, which commences from page page 5 onwards. So could I please have a mover and seconder to deal with the development application? Moved by Member Harman and seconded by Member Knight. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I think it's clearly a well-designed proposal. It picks on the locality and the design elements of the locality. So I think it is in keeping. I acknowledge the height being 6 stories in an area that currently is probably predominantly single and 2-story, but I also acknowledge that there have been a number of approvals in the sort of 4-story range. And as mentioned in the officer report, the LDP actually speaks to a number of sites nearby that could go to 5 stories. So I think the ultimate built form here is consistent with what we're going to ultimately be left with in that locality in time. I think in regards to the LDP, it encourages the mixed use and main street design, which this certainly picks up, and clearly advocates for the intensification of the area. And I think in terms of location, along Beaufort Street and the activity corridor is absolutely the appropriate place for it. So those reasons, I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, Member Harman. Member Knight, do you wish to make any comments?
Probably nothing more other than I'm very comfortable with the discretion that's being asked of us here, and supportive of what Member Harman has already spoken.
Members, any comments? Yes.
I will be foreshadowing that I will be not supporting
That's
this,
okay,
so
just go
do I.
ahead
Yep.
and speak to it.
I believe that the applicable planning instrument is well formed and provides sufficient guidance under the current scheme and sets of planning policies. And I don't believe what has been before us today would make me consider that applying any further discretion over that to vary that is supported at this time.
Thank you very much. Yes, Member Adair, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Member Franklin. I'm not actually all that comfortable with the discretion that's being asked of us at this time. And I do believe I support the fact that the framework as it currently stands is appropriate for this area. So I won't be supporting the application at this stage, unless I'm convinced in debate.
Well, who hasn't debated yet? Okay. Look, I will speak to it. Look, I think that I do really appreciate that Miles and the Mount Lawley Society has gone to some lengths to try to show the current presentation of this section of Beaufort Street and the heritage character. It is true to say, though, that 4 stories are permitted, and I think that when we look at that from a 1 and 2 story, what is currently in situ, that is not representing what is currently permitted in this area to go to 4 stories, and that would be quite a dramatic change in the street. In dealing with height, I think it's really important to look at what are the actual amenity impacts, and whilst we're looking at overshadowing, I think we've come up with a small matter of solar collectors, which is dealt with in the conditions. I think that the 6th floor is well concealed, that there has been an attempt to give a contemporary interpretation of the Art Deco character features of the area, which I think is respected. I think that faux heritage has its own issues, and that modern interpretation is a very appropriate way to go in terms of giving a nod to the heritage. The setbacks of the building, I think that the landscape, the deep soil and the on-structure planting is well done. This does have the broad support of the State Design Review panel, and I take the points that Paola has raised in relation to the articulation of the facade. So overall, I think that the height has been dealt with and is sympathetic to the 4-story vision of the local planning framework, and I think that that discretion is warranted in this case, and happy to support the development. Any further comments? Go to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. That is, I don't have to use my card to vote. So that's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll move now to item 3.3, the section 31 reconsideration of subdivision to create 2 rural lots at lot 1027 Barnup Road in Belvibus. And we're joined by Ryan Shaw and this item. Welcome to the meeting. We've heard a deputation today from Hidding and one of the residents, and some discussion about how they thought things were progressing, and some examples of subdivision. Would you like to speak to that deputation or raise any other matters?
Thank you for the opportunity. I would like just to state a few points in response to the deputation. Okay, I'll launch into. So just a very quick preliminary point. I believe this deputation, and I say this with no criticism, made reference to mediation and the parties agreeing and so forth. I just would like to clarify, we certainly agreed to a reconsideration process, which provides the opportunity for the applicant to put forward their revised plan and package for the WAPC, in this case the SDC, to reconsider In no way does this infer that we supported the proposal from an officer level perspective, and certainly mediation discussions are confidential. Moving forward to the next point, as we've heard today, that the focus of the applicant's deputation was very much centred on visual impact. We accept the second dwelling exists, and we believe the officer's report explores this relationship and issue in detail. So I'll add a few points to this. We say the planning history of the site is important. In this regard, the second dwelling was approved in 2004 under a formal planning framework which explicitly set out that the construction of a second dwelling should not be construed as support for future subdivision. We also accept that a similar subdivision was supported back in 2001, which was some 21 years ago. Again, this approval was issued under a form of planning framework where a 5 hectare minimum requirement stood, and in an era where prevailing lot size was also given weight. Building on from this, the applicant's position places strong weight on precedent, claiming the application is unique owing to the 2 dwellings. In the same sense that precedent should not be relied on as the sole reason for refusal, it is our view that precedent should not be relied on as the sole reason for support. Rather, we say one must apply the framework as it stands, and on balance, having regards to the matters set out in the officer's report, approval of the subdivision would constitute unplanned subdivision. In the absence of comprehensive planning, which seems to be occurring in the background, we feel approval would be premature and inconsistent with orderly and proper planning. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Questions, members? No questions? Okay, fine. Thank you very much for your words. We'll now move to consider the item. If I could have a mover and seconder, please. Moved by Member Moore, seconded by Member Harmon. Member Moore, do you wish to speak to the item?
Just very briefly, just to say that I don't see, well, I'm very pleased to have heard from the applicant, and thank you very much for that. I don't think it's changed any of my personal opinion on this, in that I see no exceptional circumstances, given that I don't think this is a unique circumstance, and that I do support the officer's view that it will result in ad hoc unplanned subdivision of rural land.
Member Harmon, any comment?
No, other than to sort of add, I take the applicant's point, and I tend to agree that it probably doesn't set a precedent given the unique circumstances as mentioned by the applicant in this regard, but I still think when applying the planning framework, it's very difficult to justify support of the subdivision regardless.
Thank you. Any further comments? Look, I'd just note that I understand the situation of the applicant and their strong desire. You know, on the face value, it makes sense. But when you look at the planning framework, which is what we are here to do, we do need to really give that the highest consideration. And I think it's important to note that when the development application for the second house was granted, that it was expressly stated that that did not mean that there would be any further consideration of subdivision, or that would be seen to impact that in any way. So I think that is a case of buyer beware in layman's terms, that should not have set an expectation for this subdivision request to be granted. So support the officer's views on this, and respect mediation being a confidential, and that no agreement being made at mediation, but just simply that will be considered for review. So yes, nothing further from me. Any further comments? Any dissent? Thank you, that's carried. We're now dealing with item 3.3, the City of Nedlands Local Planning Scheme number 3 and Local Planning Strategy Report of Review. And we do have Rowan Miller, Christine Collins and Jaron Milligan today. Thank you very much. We can go straight to questions on this one unless anyone everyone wants a rundown, it's quite straightforward. Yes, any questions? Yes, go ahead.
Just one of the timeframes. I'm just a bit interested to understand what the timeframe might be for the strategy review to take place.
Yeah, thank you for the question through the chair. There's no requirement for the city to do the outcomes of a report within a certain timeframe. In discussions that we've had with the city, they are motivated to do, they see benefit in updating their planning strategy, and they have resources to do that. And we'll also be working with them to assist.
Anything further, members? Okay, if I could have a mover and seconder. Thank you very much. Moved by Commissioner Adair and seconded by Commissioner Brooks. Any discussion? Any dissent? That's carried. Cool. We'll move now to item 3.4, the Shire of Harvey Local Planning Strategy Amendment number 1, 102 Toronto Road in Myla, refusal to enforce. And we're joined by Kate Gustafson, David Brash and Mark Jendrzak. By Zoom, thank you. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. We have had a deputation today from the applicant, and I wondered whether you would like to respond or make any comments before we go to questions.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we probably raise just a couple of comments in response to the deputation. The first is regarding just some clarification on the extent of the cadastre for the property and how that relates to zoning. So our understanding of the cadastre is that it picks up rural zone, but also regional open space. So I guess the important thing to note there is that depending on the nature of a future proposal, there may be implications for the region scheme as well as the local planning scheme. The second comment talks to one of the questions raised by Member Harmon and the scope for investigations to be carried out on the site in the absence of an amended strategy. That's something that the department has given some consideration to, and that's expressed through the report. But certainly that's our understanding, that there's no impediments to a landowner investigating their own land to firstly come up with a direction for a proposal. But then, depending on the nature of that more specific proposal, the planning framework does provide a lot of detailed guidance on what kind of information or investigations you would then undertake depending on the pathway you were taking, whether that was a development application pathway, which the deemed provisions set out very specific detail about the nature of information to be provided in a proposal. Similarly, the planning manual sets out what would be required in terms of manner and form and required information if, for example, it was a scheme amendment, the concurrent structure plan sort of proposal. The third point is probably speaking a little bit to the Shire's feedback regarding likelihood of supporting a scheme amendment in the absence of an amended strategy. Certainly it's the Shire's prerogative whether they initiate a scheme amendment or not. However, it seems conceivable to us that depending on the nature of a proposal and the specifics of that, certainly it may be that it is broadly consistent with the current planning strategy. But again, it would come down to what the particular details of the proposal were. And just finally, a note or a comment regarding the proposal's intentions around land use change and intensification. So it's acknowledged that the table that would be going into the strategy to support the amended strategy maps talks about potential for land use change, but the department's considered that in the context of the background report that has been presented with that proposal, and that does talk about the potential for land use intensification to occur. So just for reference, that's attachment 2 to the department's report, and I think the first reference to intensification in that is in the executive summary on page 4. That's my remark.
Thank you. Questions, members? Yes, Member Franklin.
Thank you, through the chair. I had to refresh my memory because obviously this had been considered by the SPC back in September last year with a positive recommendation at that time. And also they prepared revised amending documentation associated with that. I was just wanting to find out, since that has occurred, what has swayed or changed maybe DPLH officer's view on this proposal? Is it actually what has occurred during advertising, the comments from referral agencies? I'm just trying to sort of ascertain if there has been a change of view that has, well, obviously has been, to actually have a change recommendation in regards to this proposal.
Through the chair, thank you, Member Franklin. At the time of the report that went to Commission for consideration for advertising, the proposal was not assessed as such. The requirement under the regulations is to assess the report for manner and form. And the current regulations don't allow for refusal. It's either for approval with modifications to advertise.
So it didn't reflect previous sort of discussions with officers about the approach or engagement with the previous chair or anything in that regard. It was just purely a procedural recommendation.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? I do have a question just in relation to, if you look at the wording that Row Group is seeking to have inserted into the strategy, it does talk about opportunities for a potential land change of use. And I think the report highlights that there are a number of uses that are permissible in the rural zone. And I note Mark, your point that it's read in conjunction with the background report around the report talking to land use intensification. If the applicant wanted to investigate some of these permissible uses, my assumption is that they can go and do that without having to have anything in the scheme, in the strategy. Has there been any discussion with the department about some of those other uses, such as tourist and visitor accommodation, caravan park? There's a range there that you've highlighted in the report.
Thanks, Chair. Not to my knowledge on the specifics of some of those land uses. David may have some further background on whether some of those have come up historically in earlier discussions.
Through the chair, yeah, we haven't had any discussions about the suite of current land uses that are permissible in the zone with the proponent. The proponent, I think, fairly early on had a notion to investigate potential changes, obviously knowing what uses were currently permissible, such as caravan parks and other tourism uses. So no, we haven't broached that with them at all, really. It's really just been a proposal that was put forward to open the opportunity for further investigation in the planning strategy as is currently put forward.
Okay, thank you. Members, are there any further questions? No? All right, we'll move to consider the item. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Commissioner Brooks, seconded by Commissioner Adair.
Just to say that I think for me, there's nothing at the moment that prevents the landowner from undertaking investigations to determine an appropriate land use for the site. I don't see a particular need for this step in the process, and I think it's important to if you're trying to go back and amend the strategy, then I feel that there should be broader consideration of what that means and what the implications are than just picking one site and adding it to the strategy. So that's why I'm supporting this.
Commissioner Adair.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with Commissioner Brooks. I think that there's no necessity for this at this stage. I think that the broader strategy is where they should be looking with the Shire, and I do think that I don't see the drive for this at the moment in this area. So and I agree that there is nothing to prohibit the owner doing some investigations and tackling it that way. I understand that they are looking for a degree of certainty before spending that kind of money. The risk there I think is a little too high for us, in the risk being interpreted as giving somewhat of an agreement or a support for future subdivision or rezonings.
Thank you. Members, any further comments? This one, I understand that this has been discussed for some time and there's a history here which I think is well outlined in the report. I think that some more clarity would be required from the applicant around whether they wish to investigate some of the uses that are available under the rural zone. Obviously, the report talks about the constraints of the site, but I'd like to understand a bit more about whether some of those have been considered. The applicant today has talked about not seeking to intensify the site. So I think that does rule out a lot of uses under the urban zone. So if it is really about looking at land uses and what is available, I do feel like a good starting place is to look at some of those that are already articulated under the rural zone. And obviously this is not a full investigation, but I think that a lot of the feedback that we have received does outline the constraints of the site, and that does allude to the fact that intensification is going to be very tricky. So I would welcome the applicant to do a little bit more work and have a little bit more clarity about some of those permissible uses within the rural zone and whether that might be something that they are prepared to explore, given that it does look like the agricultural use is, you know, I think whilst it hasn't sort of been really fleshed out, but it does, you know, I can understand the applicant's perspective on the straight rural zone use as put to us. So I'd encourage the applicant to look at some of those tourism uses, for example, and perhaps that would be a good starting point. Are there any further comments? Is there any dissent? Carried, thank you. So that takes us to confidential items for discussion, decision or noting. So I will seek a mover and seconder that we close the meeting. Thank you, Member Harman, and Commissioner seconding. Any dissent? Thank you, that's